The Galactic Concorde's fleet floated above the moon of Kirill, lined up like a wall of silver blades. Their ships were a symbol of perfection, sleek, shining, sharp, and humming with the power of advanced alien technology. Each cruiser had a polished surface that reflected the stars, and every weapon was precisely calibrated for destruction. When the humans arrived in orbit, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Their ships were patched together from old cargo hulls, mining rigs, broken satellites, and leftover war scrap. Some were shaped awkwardly, others covered in mismatched metal plates. Their flagship, the Grit, looked more like a floating junkyard than a war vessel. To the Concorde's diplomats, it was a joke, and they made no effort to hide their laughter. Inside, the grand chamber aboard the alien command station, dozens of species gathered. Every delegate wore rich clothing and spoke in perfect tones, proud of their culture and heritage. When Captain Rhea Caldwell of Earth stepped forward in her plain uniform, heads turned. She looked calm, even when the Concorde ambassador made a sharp comment about humans arriving in metal coffins welded in backyards. The room echoed with soft chuckles and arrogant whispers, but Rhea only smiled. What the aliens didn't know was that while they laughed, she had already triggered the silent activation of every system on the human fleet. Each Earthship, powered by old but reliable tech, came online behind the scenes. Their weapons were hidden beneath scrap plating. Their engines were masked by leftover mining gear. They were not meant to impress. They were built to surprise. As the summit continued, Rhea stood still, her hands clasped behind her back. On the outside, she looked like a guest. On the inside, she was a general preparing for the unexpected. The humans hadn't come to start a war. They came because they were invited to observe, to speak, and to join. But from the beginning, the aliens had made it clear that Earth was not truly welcome. The invitation had been more of a test, a way to see if the humans could behave. And, secretly, to make fun of their attempts at becoming a spacefaring race. Earth, to the Concorde, was backward and poor. Their technology was seen as outdated, their culture, strange, their methods, crude. But that's what made them dangerous, because no one in the room saw them as a threat. As the alien representatives displayed holograms of their warships and proudly recited their battle histories, Rhea studied their faces. They were proud, confident, too confident. That's when she whispered a single command into her communicator. The message was simple. Begin shadow phase. It traveled instantly to every human ship in orbit. Back aboard the Grit, engineers moved quietly through dim hallways lit by blue emergency lights. Panels were lifted, systems unlocked, cloaked drone pods detached from the outer hull and drifted into space, hidden from Concorde scanners. Onboard computers shifted to encrypted combat mode. One by one, the Scrapheap ships started to change, reconfiguring themselves, rotating armor plating, releasing dust clouds to hide their movements. It was a silent ballet in space, invisible to the naked eye. Back in the chamber, Rhea asked a simple question. "Tell me," she said to the alien fleet commander, "how many of your ships are scanning for kinetic threats below light threshold?" The commander blinked. "None. Why would we need to?" he asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. In the void above, unseen by everyone in the room, a field of silent projectiles was already forming. They were primitive, non-powered. But they didn't need power. They needed timing. And the humans had calculated everything down to the second. Earth hadn't come to fight. But they had come ready. And in a fleet of so-called junk, there was a quiet strength waiting to wake up. The training exercise was announced with grand ceremony, a demonstration of the Concorde's advanced fleet coordination and combat skills, meant to impress all invited observers, including the humans, who were assumed to be nothing more than background spectators. Conquered commanders gave long speeches about cooperation and security, while their ships moved into elegant formations above the gray surface of Kirill's moon. From their polished control rooms, alien officers issued orders with practiced confidence, their displays filled with colorful diagrams and status lights. To them, the exercise was just another routine event, a chance to show off. But when the simulation started, something went wrong almost immediately. Within the first 47 seconds, 3 conquered cruisers flickered, sparked, and then shut down completely. Panic spread across communication lines as alarms blared. Systems stopped responding, lights dimmed, engines powered down. The massive ships, just moments before moving in perfect unity, drifted silently, powerless. At first, the Concord commanders accused each other of sabotage, confusion turning into frustration. Then someone noticed a pattern. Each of the disabled ships had passed near human vessels moments before failing. The aliens pointed fingers, accusing Earth of foul play. But when confronted, Captain Rhea Caldwell responded with a calm voice and a slow shrug, simply stating that any pulses must have come from the Concord's own weapon test calibrations. She offered to send human engineers to help repair the ships. The room went silent. No one accepted her offer. What the Concorde didn't understand was that Earth's ships weren't just strange. They were specifically designed to be underestimated. While alien fleets relied on energy weapons, computer targeting, and shield arrays, humanity had spent decades fighting with less, using clever tactics to win battles they were never supposed to survive. The so-called Scrapheap ships were layered with adaptive materials that absorbed scans and scattered light. Their surfaces were rough not by mistake, but to break radar locks. Inside, their weapons were hidden, not energy-based, but physical. Railguns, projectile pods, and short-range EMP devices that didn't show up on the Concorde's high-tech sensors. To the aliens, human ships looked like trash. To Rhea and her crew, they were masterpieces of practical survival. The disabled cruisers had been targeted by magnetic pulses delivered through disguised drones, launched silently during the summit, and placed in exact positions to knock out critical systems. No one had noticed. No one had expected humans to even try. As the rest of the conquered fleet tried to regroup, the human ships stayed in place, silent and unmoving. Their power signatures were low, almost like drifting debris. But behind the silence, they were watching, measuring, calculating. Every ship had already locked onto at least one target, prepared to act if pushed. The conquered leadership, now aware something was very wrong, held emergency meetings and tried to understand what had happened. Some demanded retaliation, others called for caution. And still, the humans did nothing aggressive. They waited. Rhea knew the game. She knew that striking first wasn't enough. It had to look like defense. It had to be clean, precise, and undeniable. And now, with 3 ships down, the Conquered was unsure for the first time in a century. Their confidence was shaken. Their assumptions had cracked. For too long they had mocked the humans, laughed at their rough tech and old methods. But now, the fleet that was supposed to show strength was already showing weakness. And Earth hadn't even fired a real shot. This wasn't war, not yet. But it was something else, something worse for the Conquered. It was proof that the humans didn't need to match alien technology to win. They only needed to think differently. Quietly, the Grit turned 1 degree to the left, just enough for its hidden cannon bay to face the nearest cruiser. No one noticed, but soon they would. The silence before the real battle was short-lived. Once the Conquered realized their cruisers weren't suffering from random glitches, but were being carefully taken down by the very humans they had mocked, the war officially began. Orders flew across alien command centers, formations shifted, and dozens of sleek warships moved into position with renewed seriousness. But even as their weapons charged and their sensors scanned in every direction, they found themselves chasing ghosts. Captain Rhea Caldwell did not wait for permission. She took command of the moment and led from the front aboard the Grit. Her crew, trained for situations just like this, launched into action with a smoothness born of experience. They used nearby asteroid debris as natural cover, weaving their ships between chunks of rock and ice, creating confusion on conquered scanners. Human ships that looked slow and heavy suddenly became shadows, darting, dodging, firing, then vanishing again. Mines disguised as harmless space trash floated into key zones and stuck to conquered hulls like barnacles, releasing sudden electromagnetic bursts that scrambled systems and left ships drifting in blind panic. But that wasn't all. Rhea's tech. Officers had one more surprise. Lines of ancient code, so old and simple that the Concorde's advanced firewalls didn't recognize them as threats. This junk code, built from the old Earth internet, was released into the Concorde's data streams during attempted communications, locking their targeting systems and sending their weapons into standby, or worse, misfiring into empty space. The aliens tried to adapt quickly. They rotated captains, switched to backup systems, and attempted to counter the humans with brute force. But every time they adjusted their strategy, the humans had already moved on. No two human ships fought. The same way, some stayed hidden and struck from distance with railgun slugs. Others flew dangerously close, using magnetic grapples to plant explosive devices. The ships themselves were as varied as the tactics. No identical models, no predictable behavior. The Concorde was used to uniform enemies, organized and easy to read. But the humans weren't organized. They were coordinated chaos. That made them impossible to predict. Some Concorde officers accused the humans of cheating, unable to believe such primitive-looking ships could cause this much damage. But as one cruiser after another went dark, no one could deny the truth. Earth's fleet wasn't pretty, but it was effective. As the days passed, the battle spread across the orbit of Kirill and beyond. The Concorde tried to regroup at outer checkpoints, but human scouts had already sabotaged their supply lines. Communications between conquered divisions became slower, less clear. Every message they sent could be traced. Every signal could be bait. Earth used speed, misdirection, and most importantly, adaptability. Rhea had built her strategy on one idea. The enemy would always expect the last move again, so the humans never repeated it. No attack came from the same angle. No mine used the same frequency twice. Every engagement was a lesson, and the humans were quick learners. By the end of the week, 17 Concorde cruisers had been disabled, some drifting silently in orbit, others crash-landed on moons or pulled into gravity wells. Most of the rest were already retreating toward their home sectors, broadcasting requests for ceasefire or backup. Inside the Grit, Rhea watched it all, unfold with careful eyes. She didn't smile. There was still work to do, and she knew this battle would echo far beyond the system. But she felt something stronger than pride. She felt certainty. Her people had shown the galaxy what they were made of. They weren't just survivors. They were thinkers, builders, fighters, using whatever they had and making it count. The Conquered had come expecting to give a lesson. Instead, they were the ones learning. And it was a lesson written in fire, silence, and code. The Concorde's high command had never known such failure. In all their long history of dominance, no opponent had ever disabled so many of their warships, with so little. Stung by embarrassment and burning with wounded pride, they called for a full-scale retaliation, ordering their second fleet, larger and better armed, to crush the humans and restore order. But from the moment the new ships entered the system, it was clear things would not go as planned. The Conquered expected a scattered enemy, weakened from the last battle and outnumbered. Instead, they found a coordinated network of traps and tactics waiting for them. From deep within asteroid belts, hidden outposts controlled by human engineers launched waves of orbital mines that latched onto Conquered hulls before they even reached formation. These weren't ordinary mines. They were smart, adjusted mid-flight, and could be steered remotely. Gravity tethers, previously dismissed as outdated tech, were now used with surgical precision to pull enemy ships into debris fields or lock them in tight spins, forcing them to waste fuel and time just trying to stabilize. Worse still, the Concorde's own technology, once seen as untouchable, had been studied and partially reverse-engineered by Earth's junkers, the same engineers once ridiculed by the galaxy. Now, these brilliant minds were using that knowledge to disrupt conquered systems from a distance, jamming communications and disabling weapons with stolen signal patterns. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Rhea Caldwell remained a steady force. She watched enemy ships falter and fail not because of brute strength, but because of clever thinking and quiet moves made long before the first shots were fired. Then, when the Second Fleet began to falter, she sent a message across all channels, her voice clear and calm in the middle of a storm. "We learned to fight in the dark," she said, pausing just long enough for the weight of her words to settle. "You just turned out the lights." The transmission ended, but the meaning spread like wildfire. The conquered had always relied on their power, their numbers, and their pride. But now, all three were breaking. With jammers in place and navigation systems corrupted, ships became blind. Pilots didn't know friend from foe. Officers shouted orders into dead comms. Entire cruisers spun helplessly in orbit while others were caught in crossfire because their allies no longer recognized them. Inside the fleets, confusion grew into fear, and fear became something far worse: distrust. In more than one cruiser, crews turned on their commanders, accusing them of leading them into a trap. Mutiny spread in quiet whispers, and then in loud gunfire as discipline collapsed under the pressure of uncertainty. Meanwhile, Earth's fleet had shrunk to just 12 operational ships, 12 ships that, by every logical measure, should have been overwhelmed. But these 12 were not ordinary vessels. They moved like ghosts, striking with perfect timing, each hit chosen for effect, not noise. Rhea had turned her small fleet into a scalpel. While Concorde ships stumbled over each other in panic, the humans cut through them like rusted blades through soft metal. Explosions flared, not in grand fireworks, but in silent flashes across broken hulls. One by one, the remaining Concorde vessels either fled or went dark. In less than a day, the Second Fleet was gone, not just defeated, but dismantled. And still, the humans hadn't lost a single ship. The stars above Kyril were now filled with wreckage, drifting metal, and unanswered questions. The conquered, once seen as the unshakable rulers of space, had been brought down not by superior firepower, but by a species they thought unworthy of notice. Rhea stood on the bridge of the Grit, watching as the enemy vanished into retreat. She didn't celebrate. She knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much bigger. But one thing was clear: the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The battlefield above the moon of Kyril had gone silent. Fragments of 32 conquered cruisers drifted slowly in the cold dark, their once proud hulls broken and scattered like fallen statues. The stars reflected off jagged metal, some pieces still glowing faintly from recent fires, while others spun quietly through space, reminders of how quickly power can change hands. And through it all, the human fleet remained intact. 12 ships, mismatched and battle-worn, but undefeated. Not a single loss, not even a damaged engine. The Concorde, unable to explain their total collapse, had no choice but to open communication lines with Earth's command and request a ceasefire. They didn't send threats this time. They didn't posture, they sent apologies. For a long moment, Captain Rhea Caldwell stood on the bridge of the Grit, listening to the alien voices echo through her ship's speakers. Voices that once mocked, now lowered and careful. Earth had won a battle no one thought they could fight, and now the entire galaxy was watching. But instead of celebrating with speeches or demands for revenge, Earth responded with quiet strength. Their message was clear. They didn't want trophies or planets. They wanted recognition, respect, and a seat at the table where decisions were made. The conquered, still shaken, agreed. Soon, the story of the battle began to spread across the known systems, not as a warning of destruction, but as a legend of defiance. In academies and command schools, strategists pored over every moment of the conflict, trying to understand how a force so small had broken one of the greatest armadas ever assembled. They studied the asteroid maneuvers, the disguised weapons, the silent code attacks, and the way the humans had fought. Not with advanced weapons, but with clever minds and bold risk. It wasn't just a victory in space. It was a lesson in humility. Generals who once dismissed Earth's ships as floating junk now watched recordings of the battle in silence. Students once taught to value only technology now read reports about adaptability and creativity. Human tactics became part of military studies, not because of their power, but because of their unpredictability. Earth had changed the conversation. Back on Earth, people didn't throw parades or build statues. They returned to work, strengthened by the knowledge that they had stood against giants and made the stars listen. Engineers who once welded ship parts in underground hangars were now invited to speak before interstellar councils. Scientists who worked in silence behind layered scrap walls were now teaching conquered engineers how to shield systems from their own weaknesses. What had once been a laughingstock had become a symbol. The galaxy began to see what Earth had always known. Strength wasn't always polished, and power didn't always shine. Sometimes it came from grit, from struggle, from the ability to keep building when no one believed in you. And yet, even with this recognition, the humans didn't forget how they were treated. They remembered the laughter. They remembered how their ships were insulted before they had spoken a single word. But they didn't seek revenge. They sought progress. Earth's ambassadors, once left waiting in quiet corners of galactic meetings, now sat at the same tables as the most powerful civilizations, their opinions heard and their hands no longer ignored. Captain Rhea, now a symbol of everything Earth had achieved, remained humble. She gave few interviews, preferring to let the results speak for themselves. But one phrase, said during a private debriefing, eventually spread across systems, painted onto walls, etched into metal, and repeated with respect by those who once laughed. "Don't judge a fleet by its hull." It became more than a quote. It became a warning, a reminder, and a truth. For in the silence that followed the war, one reality stood strong. The humans had come from the shadows, fought with rust and brilliance, and earned their place not through fear, but through undeniable courage.